This is from Maya in Transcarpathia, a quiet, forested region in western Ukraine, right near the borders of Hungary and Romania. I think the moment you realize your life belongs to you and not your family is the loneliest kind of freedom. Some people never get that freedom. Others grab it and carry the guilt forever. I'm still not sure which one I am. I was born in a village deep in the Carpathian Mountains, the kind of place where the mist rolls in like it's part of the family, and where nothing ever feels new, just passed down. I mean, our house had wood that creaked when you breathed too hard. Everyone knew everyone. Every path led to someone who remembered your birth, your cousins, your shame. My father was a mountain guide. He walked like he was part of the terrain, quiet, watchful, patient. I followed him sometimes, barefoot in the snow, carrying firewood or bread. He never asked me to speak. And maybe that's why I liked being with him. Around my mother, I always felt like I was doing something wrong. She was sharper than he was, more tired, more tense. She taught me how to scrub the same floor twice, how to braid herbs, how to sit with a straight back even if my stomach growled. She said good girls were like fresh apples, sweet, silent, and useful. I tried to be all three. I did. But I was already starting to rot on the inside. One afternoon, I was sweeping the front steps when I heard my uncle talking with my father. "She's ready," he said. The man in Tashkent offered 2 cows and a van. He runs a poultry business. It's a good match. They laughed like it was a blessing. I stood there, pretending I hadn't heard. But I had. And I knew, in that moment, that whatever childhood I had left, it was already gone. After that day, my mother started brushing my hair more often, slowly, carefully, like she was preparing a gift. "He has land," she'd whisper. "He won't drink like the men here." She never looked me in the eyes when she said it. Maybe she knew, but she still believed in the trade, like I was something to be exchanged, not heard. At night, I'd lie in bed, fingers clenched into fists under the blanket, listening to wind rattle the shutters like bones. In my mind, I gave the man from Tashkent a dozen faces, some kind, some cruel. I imagined sitting across from him at dinner, folding my hands just right, saying all the right things, and still, I couldn't picture myself being seen. At winter, I started writing in secret. I didn't own a notebook, so I used scraps, backs of seed catalogs, butcher paper, anything I could find. I kept them behind a loose floorboard under my bed. I wrote about other lives, other girls, some who stayed and went numb, some who ran and never looked back. Some days I didn't know which one I wanted to be. One morning, I saw my cousin Nadia slipping coins into her boot, one at a time, like a ritual. She was 17 and reckless and beautiful, the kind of girl who wore defiance like perfume. When I asked what she was doing, she smiled without turning her head. "You can't build a future if you're barefoot," she said. That sentence stayed in my ribs longer than most prayers. The marriage date was never spoken aloud, but I could feel it in the way my father avoided my eyes, and in how my mother started saving scraps of ribbon for my hair. The house felt heavier. Every pot clinked louder. I started walking to the edge of the forest after chores, staring at the train tracks in the valley below. I didn't know where they led, only that they went somewhere else. I think my body knew before my mind did that I wasn't going to survive the life they planned for me. I started waking with headaches, losing weight, forgetting things. Once I dropped a pot in the kitchen and didn't even flinch when it shattered. My mother called it nerves. I called it disappearing. I asked Nadia if she ever thought about leaving. She didn't hesitate. "Every day," she said. "But thinking isn't doing." Then she looked at me, really looked at me, and asked, "Do you want me to help you go?" I didn't answer right away, because wanting to leave and being ready to leave, those are 2 different things. We spent 2 weeks planning. She knew someone in Mukachevo who had a cousin in Hungary. I didn't know the name, just that it involved a train and a man with a red scarf. I hid my writing, wrapped coins in a sock, and folded one extra shirt into a school bag. Every time I saw my father's face, I wondered if I'd ever see it again. On the night I left, the sky was low and gray, like even the moon was hiding. I kissed the floorboards in my bedroom just once, and stepped over the sleeping dog near the door. I didn't say goodbye, not because I didn't love them, but because I couldn't bear to be loved back. We ran, quiet and fast, through the trees, across a frozen ditch, past the fields where boys used to throw stones at our window for fun. My hands were numb by the time we reached the edge of the train yard. I looked back once, not for long, just enough to promise myself I'd never do it again. The train yard in Mukachevo was colder than I expected. We hid between two freight cars, crouched in the dark, barely breathing. I remember the sound of metal groaning under pressure. It felt like the earth itself was resisting. Nadia held my wrist the whole time, like she didn't trust me not to vanish. A man arrived wearing a red scarf, just like she said. He didn't smile. He didn't explain. He nodded once and started walking. We followed, ducking behind crates, hopping fences, stepping around broken bottles. Every noise felt like a spotlight. I thought about my mother's hands braiding herbs, how quiet they were. I missed them already. We crossed the river that night, not at a bridge, but through it. The water came up to my chest. My boots filled and dragged at me like regret. On the far bank, Nadia slipped and cut her palm open. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't afford to. Tears make sound. Sound gets caught. Near the Hungarian border, we were spotted. A guard with a flashlight yelled something I didn't understand. But he didn't chase us. He just stood there, and then turned around. I still don't know if he let us go out of mercy, or because we looked too small to matter. By the way, this was the early 2000s, a time when Ukraine was still navigating the aftermath of Soviet collapse. In remote regions like Transcarpathia, poverty, isolation, and lack of legal oversight meant that informal arranged marriages, some involving teenage girls, were still quietly done, and with no contract, but with whispers of elders. So for girls like me, escape was a matter of survival. People think escape is the end of the story. But really, it's the start of a quieter kind of grief. Girls like me carry years in silence. The guilt of surviving, the shame of leaving, the fear that maybe we were never really brave. Just lucky. Even now, certain smells, certain songs, they take me back. The feeling of being trapped in a life someone else wrote for you. I made it to Hungary first. I stayed with my cousin's friend in a cramped basement for 2 weeks, eating boiled potatoes and speaking almost nothing. From there, I crossed into Austria with the help of a church group. Then, I don't even remember how, but I landed up on my to Canada. By the time I landed in Toronto, I was 17 and hollowed out, but I had a bed, and no one waiting to trade me. Canada didn't feel like freedom. It felt like noise, motion, things I couldn't name. I didn't speak much English, and I didn't want to talk anyway. People asked where I was from. I'd say Ukraine, and they'd smile, like that explained something. It didn't. I lived in a shelter at first, then with a distant relative who let me sleep on her fold-out couch. I worked odd jobs, cleaned offices at night, folded clothes in silence. Sometimes I'd stare out the bus window and think, what if they still think I'm coming back? That thought used to make me nauseous. Then there was film school, which wasn't part of my plan. It just happened. Someone at a community center saw my drawings and said, "You've got an eye." I didn't believe them, but I enrolled anyway. In a class full of confident voices, I whispered, but the camera didn't mind. It let me tell stories without raising my voice. My first short film got into a local festival. People clapped. Someone called me a voice for the voiceless. I smiled, but it felt wrong. How could I be a voice for anyone when I'd never told my own story? Not once, not even to myself. Success felt like a costume I hadn't earned. I had papers, yes, a small apartment, even a shelf with a trophy. But every time I looked in the mirror, I saw girls still standing in a cold river. Not a filmmaker, not a survivor, just someone who got away and doesn't know what to do with that fact. The first letter came 3 years after I left. No return address, just my name, written in my mother's soft, slanted hand. Inside was a note folded in half and a bundle of dried thyme. She didn't say much, just, "We hope you are warm. We hope you are full." I read it once, then again. Then I put it in a shoebox and didn't open the next one for a year. There were more letters over the years, none angry, none begging, just updates. Someone got married, someone passed, the plum trees were late to bloom. But the last one was different. It said, "We didn't know how to love you in the right way, but we tried. If you ever want to come home, there's always soup." I live in Vancouver now. I teach part-time, help others tell their stories, and sometimes I sit by the window, just listening to the city hum. Some days I feel like a new person. Other days, I feel like a girl made out of unfinished sentences. Like I never really arrived, I just stopped running. Sometimes I still braid herbs, not because I have to, but because it reminds me that I came from somewhere. And that somewhere still remembers me, even if I never go back. If you've ever left something behind, not because you wanted to, but because you had to, then maybe you'll understand. And if you were me, what would you have done? Can you ever really separate yourself from where you came from? If this story spoke to you, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and maybe someone else out there needs to hear them too.